Welcome to the WeHackPurple podcast, where each month we meet someone new from information security and they teach us something incredible about how to secure all the things. This episode, like every episode, is sponsored by Bright, and they make a DAST that does all the things you need, such as finding vulnerabilities. But today we're going to talk about SOC 2 and what the heck is that with James Tabron. James, how's it going?
It is going great. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me on to speak on this topic that I have a wealth of experience and exposure to. Started in 2016 when I was hired by a company called SendGrid, which was a pretty high growth startup at the time. SendGrid pioneered the technology for transactional email. So it's all, I could think of it as all the email that you actually want, right? You want that Uber ride receipt or that Lyft ride receipt. You want your Spotify password reset email as quickly as possible. So SendGrid really pioneered this technology. And when I joined, there were about 150 employees.
Mhm.
And it was just growing really, really fast, probably north of 100% year over year around that time.
Wow.
And I was brought in, as you can imagine, when you're growing that fast, for a lot of startups, they're not thinking about security, let alone compliance, right? And so in 2016, that was when I began my journey through the SOC 2 landscape and trying to build a SOC 2 compliance program in an environment that was just growing so fast. I had to learn really fast, but I gained a depth of knowledge of how to do this the right way and how you can do it the wrong way.
Okay. Yes. So I invited James to be on after we were on a panel together at ZapCon. And basically, every time he would say something, it was like a mic drop. It would be like the most concise, best answer. And I was like, I wonder if I could convince him to come on the podcast. So that was good. So then we're talking like, what should we talk about? And so We Hack Purple has joined forces with Bright. And one of the first things was SOC 2 compliance. And so James and I were talking about SOC 2 compliance and basically how he has this experience now, like multiple times, of just a startup that's exploding essentially, and then trying to start doing SOC 2 compliance. And so, James, what is SOC 2 and why should we care?
That's a great question. So SOC stands for Service Organization Controls, right? And so if we break that down, the company or your high growth startup is the service organization. And it is a framework of controls to guide you to providing assurance to your customers that they can that they can trust you with their data.
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of people don't think about building a compliance program until they grow to a place to where they start taking on serious customers and start ingesting sensitive data. And there are varying degrees of sensitivity to that data, right?
Mm,
And most people don't know, most companies don't know exactly how sensitive their data is because you're growing so fast and you're probably potentially breaking some privacy regulations somewhere. You don't really know. But you're also probably not really thinking about the best way to protect the data. And SOC 2 really gives you, we'll talk about the type of attestations there are, but SOC 2 really gives you a framework and an organized approach to assuring your customers that you are doing the right thing by their data. But it doesn't just cover security, okay?
mhm.
And now we'll get into some of the intricacies of it and what makes it really valuable. It doesn't just cover security. It covers 5 different, what they call trust service principles, okay?
Okay.
And the first trust service principle in the very least. Also, some of these are optional, and some of these you just have to do. So security is the first one. You absolutely have to do security.
Yes.
And
Yes. Did you hear
security,
James say that? You absolutely have to do security, listeners. Listen to
absolutely, you have
James.
to do security.
Sorry. Yes. Okay,
So
please
the first,
continue.
so security, security refers to information during its securing information during its collection or creation, use, processing, transmission, or storage. Okay.
Okay.
The second one is availability. All right. This is a a part of security that some people don't associate with security, but this is the information and systems are available for operation and use to meet the entities or the service organization's objectives. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that. Now we're going, so most people will do security and availability at the very least. Okay. After that, there's processing integrity, which is the system processing is complete, valid, accurate, timely, and authorized to meet the entity's objectives. Okay. Confidentiality is the next one. So the information that is designated as confidential is protected to meet the company's objectives. And then the last one, which was added relatively recently, is privacy. So if you're looking to build a privacy program that is aligned with those GDPR standards, you can actually use the SOC 2 framework to do that. And this is, personal information is collected, used, retained, disclosed, and disposed of to meet the company's objectives. So these 5 trust service principles really are the guiding light for any organization who wants to receive their SOC 2 attestation. So first, there's 2 different types of SOC 2s. Okay.
Oh, okay.
2 different types. There's a type 1 and a type 2. Okay. Type 1 is just a test of the design of the controls that will be built out to meet these objectives.
Okay.
This one is relatively, it's a step in the right direction, but a type 1 is not going to satisfy your customers. A type 1 basically says, okay, you got some controls, great start. All right. But we have not really tested the effectiveness of those controls. A type 1 just basically says, okay, an independent auditor has determined that the controls which you have written meet the criteria to the SOC 2 standards. Okay.
Okay.
And some companies can get a type 1 and compared to getting the type 2 is actually relatively, it's easier. The type 2 says, okay, you've actually had these controls that you've written down and come up with. You've actually had these controls in place for a certain period of time, and they've been operating effectively. Okay. So depending on the audit period that you choose, you can choose 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, I believe. So if I want to be audited every 3 months, then I have to manage and maintain those controls at 3-month increments or periods.
Why would someone want to be audited more often, James? Why? That sounds hard. Sounds harder.
Yeah, it is harder, but when you're testing the controls, you will only have to show that they've been operating for a 3-month period, as opposed to a 12-month period, right?
Okay, I see.
So when I was at SendGrid, we did it every 12 months. And so you have to show that. So the way they're gonna, now we're getting into some of the intricacies of how this is actually tested. So the auditor, you're gonna have an independent, this is what makes the SOC 2 valuable to your customers. Okay. Is that there is an independent audit firm that comes in and they test the controls for you. And then they write a report and then they give an attestation that based on their audit, that you meet the criteria that is laid out in the AICPA's SOC 2 Type 2 framework.
Okay.
So what they're going to do is to test these controls, they're going to take a population of data. So let's pick a random control. Let's say you have a control that says, because the way they organize this is that there are certain principles that they kind of categorize the control families into. So there's principles around the control environment. Do you have proper board oversight, senior executive oversight? Do you have, is there an amount of independence between your board and management, things of that nature? Risk assessments. Are you performing risk assessments? Do you have a risk management program? Monitoring activities. Are there controls that you put in place to monitor the type of control environment that you have? Access controls, change management, system operations. So a lot of people will say, well, how do I start building this program? See, SOC 2 provides that guidance and that framework for you to be able to start laying the foundation for an effective compliance program. But so let's just say we have a control that says within 24 hours, every employee who terminates or leaves the company, their access is removed within 24 hours.
That is a great rule. That is a super great rule.
That's a great control. That's a great control, right?
A lot of people don't do it, James. I'm a pen tester. You come back again and again and again, and you just like log in and you're just in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a really good control. And it's literally the first one that kind of popped into my head, right? Because it's a challenging control to own and maintain effectively. But it's a good one, as you said. Like, you don't want people who don't work here anymore having access to customer data, right?
Especially if they were let go and they're angry.
Exactly. So, as you can imagine, to test this control, and an auditor will say, okay, give me a list of all of the employees who have terminated in the last year, and they're fair game for the entire year. But if I use it in 3-month increments, then they can only say for the last 3 months. Right?
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So now they ask for, okay, give me everybody for the last 3 months, and you can give them a population of people that that have terminated in the last 3 months, and then they pick a sample from your population
and test.
And they say, okay, yes, and they say, okay, show me how's your control design. Show me how you manage this control or how you validate this control is taking place. Oh, okay. When an employee is terminated, there's a ticket sent to our IT team. The IT team makes a note and says access is terminated, and depending on the auditor, they may say something like, okay, show me in your account management or authentication management system, something like, LDAP or something like that, or whatever it might be. Show me that the person is no longer, has an account, and notes in the ticket that, show when the access was removed. Okay. So if I had a whole year, I may potentially have 25 people that I have to do this for. Because most of their samples, they can typically go around 25 people. Just like you might have a control that says all of our endpoints have antivirus software on them, right? And so you have to give them a population of all the endpoints in the environment. They'll pick a sample of 25 and they'll say, okay, show me the evidence that these, that these laptops have antivirus software on them. And so we kind of digress a little bit, but the reason you should care about this is because your customers care about it, right?
Yes.
Your customers are usually the people, or the entities, should I say, that are putting pressure on a high growth startup to validate and provide insurance that they can trust the service organization or your company with their data. And that when they need to use your services, they'll be able to, that you have thoughtfully put controls in place to ensure the availability of the service that you're providing. And so that's what I see with a lot of startups is they're growing, they've raised money, they're growing, they're taking on customers, revenues increasing, they're hiring people like crazy. And then they just get that one customer that says, where's your SOC 2 report? And they're like, huh?
I've
What's
had
that?
customers ask for that, and I was like, we don't got that.
Yeah. And at that point, the customer has to make a decision, and depending on how big the customer is, how serious they are about security, how many controls they have in place, because some of the controls that are in the SOC 2 framework do manage third-party vendors.
Oh, yes.
And how well you vet your third-party vendors, because as we know, third-party vendors can be an entry into
An entry point.
your an entry point into your internal systems. Just ask Target about that. And
it's a big issue with mergers and acquisitions, and part of WeHackPurple joining Bright, yes, we need to become SOC 2 compliant as part of the deal. Yep.
Oh, really? So this is just
join forces, and then you got to do the thing. So this is a perfect timing for you to teach me everything, James. So
yeah, well, there's a lot I could teach you.
It sounds hard, James. Are there challenges that we should watch out for?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest challenges that I've seen are identifying the right people to own this program.
Okay.
Identifying the right people to actually own the controls, right? Because each control has to have an owner assigned to that control.
Yeah.
Also, one of the biggest is understanding how to create smart controls. Okay, this is one of the biggest ones. I probably should have led with this.
Okay.
The good thing about SOC 2 is you actually write the controls yourself. Now there are some frameworks from a compliance standpoint that tell you what you have to do, right? But SOC 2 only provides a guided framework. There are certain criteria you have to meet with your controls, and the independent auditor or the audit firm, when done well, is a partner with you in this, okay? I would not advise someone to do this completely independent of the audit firm, okay? Because the audit firm has done, hopefully, thousands of these audits. They've helped other companies write their controls to make sure, you want to make sure that any control you write actually satisfies the criteria that it's trying to meet, okay? So this is why the partnership between the company and the audit firm are so important, because you have to allow that audit firm to have an understanding of how your environment works, so that you can help them come up with controls that make sense for your environment, right?
Oh, that's awesome, though.
So yeah, it helps. But if you don't know this, I've seen some companies try to find a template of controls somewhere, right? And you can find a template of controls, and then you start thinking, oh, I have to do this stuff. Actually, you have to meet the criteria that control has been written for, but you don't have to write the control any way that someone else has.
Yeah.
Right? The example that I gave you before,
24
hours, right? I've seen 3 days, right? I've seen controls say 3 days. It doesn't have to be 24 hours, right?
Okay.
It just has to meet the criteria that control is designed for. And so this is why, depending on how robust of a program or your goal for the program, um, this is why it could be good to build a small team of people that
Mhm.
build this from the ground up and manage it.
Mhm.
Or, you might try to automate, get some type of software that automates your SOC 2 compliance. And there are automated SOC 2 compliance um, products on the market.
Okay.
But this is some of the biggest challenges that I've seen. Also, because you're growing so quickly,
Mhm.
things change so much.
Yeah.
And so the person who owned the control last year may not be the person who owns the control this year. In fact, that person could no longer be with the company. And nobody told you.
Yeah.
So, so when you go to try to validate this control, you realize that it doesn't have a control owner anymore, and you're in the audit period.
Mm.
So, yeah, right. So the amount of, I'm touching on some of the problems that I've seen personally. So now I have to figure out, oh shucks, was the control in place and operating effectively during this time, even though it didn't have an owner for a specific period of time? Um, or did it just completely wet the bed and nobody was getting properly offboarded for 3 months? And now I've got to go back and see that, oh my goodness, there are 12 people who who've gone beyond that 24 or 3-day period that the control set, right? And
Yes.
so that's where the having a compliance analyst who is absolutely invested
Mhm.
in this program and company that supports the program is
Mhm.
essential. Because when you start facing these challenges of we've had some change, somebody changed something about the environment and didn't tell the security team, or so lines of communication, I think that's what I'm getting to, right?
Yes.
Is the lines of communication between the person who manages the SOC 2 compliance program and the rest of the company, because these controls are not just engineering focused, they're people focused.
Mhm.
There's capacity planning controls, there's risk management controls, board oversight types of controls. So it's a very broad set of controls around security and availability. And we're not even going into processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. That's when it gets really, really challenging. But if you do want to mature and strengthen your compliance muscle or program, you can
Mhm.
start venturing into these extra trust service principles. But the lines of communication are one of the greatest challenges that I see with companies as the company grows and things change. Um,
Would you
having
say
someone, no, go
would you
ahead.
say that the compliance officer, it's sort of their job to make sure none of the balls get dropped?
Yeah, if you have a good compliance analyst or
That's what
manager,
they do.
if you have a good compliance manager, then they completely own the program, right? And they're actually testing the controls before the auditors do, right? And
Mhm.
so when I was running this program, it's kind of like sports, right?
Okay.
Whereas if you practice hard, the game will likely be easier. And
Yeah.
so we used to practice hard and we would test the controls ourselves and kind of babysit them a little bit,
Mhm.
right? So there were no surprises when you had that audit. And if you did find something, you have the relationship with your audit firm to say, hey, I found this thing. This is what we're doing to address it. What do you think? Do you think this is an exception? An exception basically means, and exceptions are not necessarily bad. They're basically like you failed this control. Um,
Yeah.
This one control, you're supposed to do 24 hours. There are two people who go into 2 days. That's an exception. Now, you want to try to avoid having too many of them, but
Hmm.
you can still appease your customers if you have a report that has some exceptions in it. Now,
Okay.
they give you an opportunity to provide a response in the report to those exceptions and kind of what you did to address it, how you discovered it, what you're doing to address it, right?
Okay.
And so your customers read that report and they say, okay, we feel okay, we can trust you with our data.
So before we started recording, you told me that there's an automated SOC 2 tool out there. Do you
Yeah,
want to tell us about it?
um, absolutely. Yeah, there is an automated SOC 2 compliance product called Byte Check. I think it's BYTECHEK. Fantastic group of people, fantastic founder, and the product is just simply amazing. And it really does allow you to automate many, if not all, of your controls. And then it actually provides a service where they can actually perform the audit because they're plugged in. The integrations that they have with your environment allow them to test and validate the controls from an automated fashion. And they have someone on their staff that can actually um, monitor those controls, test those controls, and then actually issue you a report. So like a one-stop shop. So there are some companies that would be a good solution to, or solution to their problem. But there are going to be some companies who find that they want maybe a little bit more of a personal approach to managing a SOC 2 compliance program. And in that sense, you're going to potentially have a couple of compliance analysts, depending on the size of your your company. But it's really important that you don't hire people that are just really good with compliance frameworks. The soft skills needed to do this very well are absolutely essential,
Yeah.
primarily because it can be done wrong and in a cold way. And there's a warm way to implement a SOC 2 compliance program where your environment actually uh, is improved, but your culture is actually improved, and people actually don't find it painful. I've seen
Oh,
that if you do it
yeah.
right.
Okay, that sounds very important. I find that in the We Hack Purple podcast, quite often, a lot of things in security, it's like if you want to do a better job, you need to have empathy. If you want to do a better job, you need to have good communication skills, and all of those things fall under soft skills again and again and again. I have one last question for you, James. If someone wants to get started with SOC 2, how do they start?
Sure. Uh, well, first, I think it is really essential for you to find the right audit partner. Um, that audit partner will be able to provide a readiness assessment for you.
Okay.
They're going to look into some of the controls you have in place, the data stores, access to the data, some of the controls around people and how you deliver, code to production. What's that? Do you have a CI/CD pipeline or process, and how do people do that? How do you manage your software delivery process? Do you have a current security program at all? And if so, what are some of the controls around how you manage vulnerabilities and things of that nature? So they're going to tell you, look, you're starting from scratch. This is what we recommend, and this is how long we think it'll take. Or they'll tell you, we think you're fairly close to being ready to where you need to go. And I think when you work with that audit partner, they can probably provide a recommendation on whether or not your operation is suitable for some type of automated SOC 2 compliance product,
Mhm.
or if they believe that it's better for you to hire a team. And if you go the route of hiring a team or a person to at least start this, I think that it's good to have to start with one dedicated person. They can be a person that is responsible for the overall program. That could be, I've seen this fall under legal. I've seen this fall under security, finance. So I've seen this, kind of fall under different people's purview. The most common are legal and security. So it's good to have, a person that is responsible for the success of the program, that does have buy-in from executive leadership. Okay, that is an extremely important part of this. You have to have buy-in from executive leadership, and that may require someone who is able to tell that story.
Okay.
So someone who is knowledgeable, that's worked with their customers to understand their needs, and is able to communicate effectively to the people, the team of people that can provide some of the authority that you would need to go in and start making changes and implementing controls. So I think it's finding the right audit partner. I think it's finding the right person to own the program. And then it's hiring someone, as I said previously, who doesn't just know what the right things are to do, but knows the right way to do them. Because compliance in a fast growth or high growth startup is going to be difficult, because compliance is beginning to change mindset and culture to be more mature in the way that we operate. So you have to have someone with really good soft skills that can communicate effectively why we are doing this, and to continue to champion this program, because you can't just go in and say, we're going to start doing this way because you have to. That is the quickest way to have a very poor compliance program.
Oh,
You
yeah.
have to build relationships. So the person or the team of people that you hire to do this, soft skills should come over their SOC 2 or compliance framework knowledge. They had to be really good relationship builders, and very good motivators, and very good with influence. Because if you do it right, what I have seen, the success that I have seen, is people actually want the controls in place because you have communicated. Because in the high growth startup, everyone's financial well-being is tied to the success of the company. And
Yes.
so if we can't take on larger customers because these things keep getting in the way, then you have to communicate that this is what's going to get us to go public. And with SendGrid, that's what happened. Is because we had these controls in place, we were able to get our Sarbanes-Oxley controls in place around financial reporting, because our SOC 2 program was already so strong. So that decreases the amount of time to put those financial reporting controls in place so we can go public. So you have to have someone that can build that narrative and share that story. So I think, that's the success that I've seen, is that even after, I've moved on to being a part of a different program or team, I still saw that the lasting effects of people implementing the controls, because the culture was as such as, hey, we do this because it is a SOC 2 control, but it makes sense. It makes sense that you would do this thing to protect our customers and to be able to validate that we're doing things the right way. So that's how I would get started. I would pick a good partner and make sure you have the correct owner for the program, and hire people that are highly emotional intelligent and are very good relationship builders with great influence. And that's a good way to start.
Seriously, James, that is very similar to when I advise people to hire for AppSec, like a person that knows how to talk to software developers and who really wants to help them and show, like, yes, all the things you said, almost all of them apply to application security. And I have to say that when someone else comes on the podcast and then says all the things that I've previously been saying, it really helps me. I'm like, see, James said it. It's not just me. Listen to James. Thank you so much
I
for
appreciate
coming.
that.
Oh, James, thank you so much for coming on the We Hack Purple podcast. Everyone who's listening and watching, you can follow James or you can try connecting with him on LinkedIn. He's not really a Twitter guy, and that is okay. So check him out on LinkedIn and follow him to see some of the things he's doing next. And with that, we're going to wrap up. So today we had James Tabron on the show to talk about SOC 2 compliance. As usual, we are sponsored by Bright, who make a great big fancy DAST that can scan all your web apps. WeHackPurple has all sorts of things happening in the community right now. We have all sorts of events coming up, including one with a woman named Tina, who's a community member, who's going to teach us about how to negotiate for security. And so I hope to see you at some of those events, and I hope to see you at the next We Hack Purple podcast. Bye.